Be careful with your dealings with the ruling authorities. This is chapter 2, Mishnah 3. Which page is it in the blue book?
53.
3. All right, awesome. Okay. Be careful in your dealings with the ruling authorities. This is a very straightforward Mishnah. There's no multiple things. It's pretty simple. They do not befriend a person except for their own needs. They seem like friends when it is to their own interests, but they do not stand by a person in their hour of distress. Pretty straightforward.
You could make friends with the rabbis.
I don't think this is talking about that. This is talking about like, politicians.
Okay.
It's similar to like, election around election time when politicians promise you the world, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it finally gets to once they're elected, they forget about everything they said. What? So that's simple. They're being your friend because they want to, except for their own needs. They seem like friends when they need something from you, but they do not stand by you in your hour of distress. When you need them, they're not there for you. So it's not a real type of connection or relationship. Another way to read this, I offered in the book. Well, there's two other ways to read it. Here's one more way to read it, but I'm actually gonna dive into the other way, but this is a second way. The third way we're gonna kind of focus on, but the second way is like this. Be careful. Hevu zirim b'rashut. Be careful with the rashut. This is gonna be an important word for us as we study here. Let me try to make it a different color. All right. I lost them. Okay, let me make this a different color. Let's make this. Okay. Be careful with the rashut. What is a rashut? So it literally means the governing authorities. What?
Russia is bad. The root is Russia.
Rishut. You're right. It's with the ayin. But this doesn't have it. So it's rashut is from the language of the rosh ahead, the top. So those up top, the rashut. Yeah, those on top of the government or whatever. But it also could mean rashut means to get permission. So be careful to get permission before you're doing something as like as a leader. If you're working like in a hospital, you're working in a system where you have people higher up. Before you make big moves, make sure you get the permission to do it, because in your time of distress, if you succeed in what you're doing, you won't get the credit, obviously. But if you fail, you definitely will get blamed. So if you should, before you take steps, make big moves under people who are authorities above you, make sure you get the rashut, the permission to do what you're doing. It's very like kind of practical guidance. So does the word
CYA.
CYA.
Cover your.
Okay, thanks.
Don't go out on the limb alone.
Yeah. 1 second. So it says that's what he says here. That's it. Be careful to ask permission. The word rashut, which you read as ruling authorities, could also denote rashut, permission. Gam Lamiel advises those who work for the community. Be very careful to secure permission, proper authority for everything you do. Make sure that the lines of responsibility are clear. Perhaps you are to build a synagogue in your community. Before you do, put everything down in black and white. A record of the vote that was taken, who were present, what powers were given you, etc. Should you ever take things upon yourself without clarifying your authority and responsibility, then if you succeed, the chances are that someone else will take the credit. If you fail, however, and the building effort remains halted, bogged down midway, few people will stand by you. Instead of commending you for courageous initiative and spirit effort, they will say, who asked you to start? When working for the government community, assure yourself first of your mandate. People can be fickle. Okay, that's a simple teaching. That's two simple teachings. Here's a third one that's not so simple, but it has I think a pretty awesome message. The one I offered in the book. I saw this, I don't know who, in the name of whom or who, but the word rashut also means permitted acts. Be careful in the world of permitted acts. What does that mean? In the world of Torah, there's forbidden acts. There's commanded acts, right? Things that we're commanded to do: eating matzah, putting on tefillin, lighting candles, all those things. Things that you're not commanded, things that are forbidden for you to do. Eating on kosher, I don't know, Shabbos, things that are forbidden. And then there's things that are permitted. I call this the gray zone. Right? What's the gray zone? There's a lot of things that you can do that aren't forbidden and aren't commanded. What's an example of that? Just from regular life. I don't know, eating a bag of popcorn. I
Yeah.
don't know. Is it commanded? No.
Playing
Is it
sports,
forbidden? No. Yeah. Playing sports. What else?
reading
reading a
Jewish
novel.
literature, yeah.
Yeah, nothing like, let's say it's like not forbidden, like it's not something really bad or whatever. Let's say, what else? What other examples? Going to a baseball game.
Movies.
There's a mitzvah to go to a baseball game. I know my kids would say the mitzvah to go to the Ravens game, but I would say the Eagles, but whatever. But what about a baseball game, a football game? All these things, they could be in the area of the gray zone, right? And so I think the previous Mishnah, if you remember the previous Mishnah, it said this here. 1 second. It said like this. Oh, we had a lot of notes on that one. Wait, so we skip that Mishnah.
Well, the title was
Here it is.
honestly assessing our views and inclinations.
Yeah, so that's here. Excellent is the study of the Torah when combined with a worldly occupation. Remember that from last week? Also, all the labor, okay, so make sure you combine them, derech eretz, meaning the ways of the world. Remember Rabbi Hirsch, Shimson Raphael Hirsch says, you have to connect the Torah. If you're inclined to be involved in the world and like you can't study all day. So find an outlet for what you need so that you can succeed in studying, right? Here's a balancing text. Don't go overboard with the permitted world. Hevu zirim barashut. Be careful in the world, in the gray zone. It's not saying don't enter the gray zone. It's saying be careful with it. Why should we be careful with the gray zone? Why can't, if it's permitted, why don't I just stay in the gray zone as much as I can? So what's the problem with that? Do you get what I'm asking? Okay, we have the world of permitted. I can sit in my house and play Monopoly all day and not be doing a sin and not doing a mitzvah. I could sit in my house and chat with somebody, maybe not speaking any gossip, but like just spending time chatting for 5 hours. Or I can use multiple examples. We can watch NFL on Sunday and watch back-to-back games from 1 o'clock all the way through 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, yeah. And you can watch the red zone. I guess that's like where you can watch multiple games at a time or something like that, right? I don't know. Or you could play video games from what's wrong. Why would this Mishnah be saying be careful with the world of the world of the permitted, the gray zone? Okay, so that's good. So it can lead you to sin, right? So if you're involved in video, you're a gamer, you can end up on some stream with some gamer who's like cursing the whole time or something like that. It could lead you to a sin or something like that. Yeah. Or you could be chatting with a friend before you know it. They go, did you see what that person did with their house? And they start talking about that. And then, well, that really got people laughing. But like, it can start in one place and then you go, oh, that person, I can't stand them. Really? Oh, I can't stand this. Before you know, so it's like a slippery slope. So that could be one reason why the gray zone you might have to be careful. Let me actually read to you how you can read this. Hevu zirim barashut. Be careful with the gray zone, with the permitted spaces. Why? Because they look like they're going here. They look like they befriend a person for their own needs. They seem like friends when it's their own interest, but they do not stand by a person in their hour of distress. So here's a way to read it. It looks really great in the moment. However, if you're only involved in the gray zone, that's another problem why it might be an issue. I feel like I go in this way, I can see one person, but I can't see another person. But okay, but if you're completely involved in the gray zone, you don't have you won't have the spiritual strength and like the stamina for those times when you really need it. Like it's very important to build your spiritual, your like I guess your batteries. Have a lot of spiritual batteries, because if you're consistently involved in the permitted world and you're not involved in mitzvahs that often, when you're in a time of distress, that permitted world doesn't always stand by you. But the kedusha, the holiness of the mitzvot, they can give you the extra strength to pull you through. That's another way to read this, right? It could be like this. Be careful in your dealings with the permitted world, because they do not befriend a person except for their own needs. Meaning, the permitted world, it's beneficial for you to be involved for their own needs. They seem like friends when it's your own interest, but when they not stand by a person in hour of distress. If you're consistently not involved in Torah per se, you're consistently involved in the baseball or basketball or football, whatever. At a certain point in your time of distress, you need something to tap into.
Call it stush.
Yeah, so it's not saying not to be involved. It's not saying it's forbidden. It's just saying don't overdo it.
But it's
So if you
but at the same time, if you can bring your relationship to God into whatever the stush you're doing. Like you said, a baseball game, there's a kosher stand in a baseball game.
Correct.
See lots of nice kids in a baseball game.
yeah, so
They're-
so that's another way to like escape the dangers of the world of the permitted, the gray zone, which we would call it. One of them is to elevate it. So you may have food, you're a big foodie, so make a bracha over all your food and think about Hashem, and Hashem gives you all these blessings that can help you elevate it.
He gave you the pleasure to sit there at Oriole Park and watch baseball.
Let's take a step back. I gave you two possible problems with the world, the gray zone. One, you mentioned that it could be a slippery slope. Number two, it might not stand up for you in your time of distress. You need that spiritual reservoir to tap into. I'll give you an example. For instance, like Elon Musk, he's a pretty industrious person. He gets a lot done. I just saw like an interview with him where he says like, since I bought Twitter, which is now X, it's like I work 7 days a week. Doesn't have Shabbos. He works 7 days a week. From the morning to like 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks or something like that. I don't know how long, maybe longer. I don't know. But for him, taking those breaks, or not doing what he has to do would be not beneficial for his business, and it would cause disruption. So he doesn't have time really for the gray zone currently in his life. Similarly, this is a third reason why too much involvement in the gray zone could be problematic. If you're consistently doing all those other things, you're not doing Torah, you're not learning Torah. Are you gonna say that?
Yeah.
Like, so are we saying something's wrong with chatting with a friend? Absolutely not. It's great to come together as a community. And I had a lot of people in yeshiva who always wanted to chat with me, and I many times said I can't because I want to study Torah. And thankfully, I did that, because otherwise I'd just be chatting the whole time. Something wrong with chatting? No. However, too much involvement in the gray zone can sometimes remove you from your productivity. That's what I think it's saying here. Hevu zihirim. Be careful with it. It's not saying hevu zihirim. So there's the first stage is like what could be the problem. The second stage is what is the remedy. There's multiple remedies to this. Be careful to invest in Torah and mitzvot. Another remedy is that when you're involved in the gray zone, which is not forbidden, not commanded, to elevate it, right? Or to elevate it could be to make a bracha, or to see the positive aspects of it, or it could be that somebody needs that world as an outlet. Like they grew up going to following a team or whatever, and they grew up very passionate about following that team, and they get older and then they start coming to Rabbi Yogo's class, like, I only want to learn Pirkei Avot all day long. I really still like that team. So it doesn't mean you have to cut yourself off. It's really about being zahir, like figuring out the right dosage that works for you. It can keep you inside and not draw you too far out. Yeah, somebody else. Yeah, Sheila.
I
Yeah,
think that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's all about balance. And if you too much of anything, if you get obsessive compulsive with anything, I think it's not good.
yeah. So
So I just think it's about, we talk about work-life balance. I think that you really just have to, like your example of Elon Musk, I mean, okay, you might not think that's a gray zone, but like, what about his family? What about his children? Like, if he has children, family, you miss all that, like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's all about the balance.
yeah.
And I just think Hashem would want us to have the balance.
Okay, so let's stay balanced. Let's keep going on to the next Mishnah. Sound good? So just summarizing this Mishnah though, the Rashut means the governing bodies. That's a simple reading. I offer another reading based on some commentaries I saw. The Rashut could mean the permitted world. So be careful with the permitted world, because if you overindulge in the permitted, you might not have strength to stand up against stuff that you face. You don't have the spiritual reservoir. And we extended that discussion beyond and talked about other dangers of the permitted world, being overly involved in it could take you out, and like be a slippery slope, all other kinds of issues. We talked about some remedies as well. So that's an interesting topic. Let's go on to the next one. If you do get the source sheet, I actually have a whole source sheet on the gray zone. It's pretty interesting. So you can check that out. But we're gonna not do that right now. This is kind of a complicated Mishnah, but I think I can tease out like a not complicated message for us. Okay, but it's the kind of this Mishnah I've been working on this Mishnah for years, trying to really crack it. I don't think I've cracked it yet, to be honest. But here's the Mishnah. This is page 55. Okay, next Mishnah. He used to say, "Make his will like your will." Who's his? God's. Make God's will like your will.
Who was he?
Who is who?
He says, he used to say, who is he?
He is the previous Rabban Gamliel. Because he 2 Mishnahs ago was he used to say, Rabban Gamliel says, make his will, God's will, like your will, so that he will make your will like his. Somebody explain that to me, please. It's like a tongue twister. Make his will like your will, so he make your will like his. There are multiple ways to understand this, but what might be a way to understand this? Like just one way to read it. How do I just read this? What is it saying?
If you do what God wants you to do, God will do what
Explain.
you want to do.
So what's an example? I want to go eat some bacon. I'm gonna go put on tefillin, and like God will do my will and let me eat bacon. Sorry, it's just
That was reverse of what I was thinking.
okay. What were you thinking?
If God commands you to put on tefillin and you put on tefillin, when you ask for a favor from God, can you help me through this horrible time I'm going through? God will be very responsive to you.
So make his will like your will. You know, start to do God's will, and through that, he will make your will
His will.
his will. Okay. So I'll explain how what I wrote here overall, like another way to understand this. We didn't even focus on the second part of this Mishnah. Let me share the screen. The second part of the Mishnah, nullify your will in the face of his will. So you would think the parallel would be, so God will nullify his will in front of your will, but it doesn't say that, right? There's not parallel. It's so that he will nullify the will of others for the sake of your will. So, whoa, how did something else got thrown in here, other people. So I read it like this. Can make your will. So when we start out in Judaism, we don't know, or we start out on any spiritual path, it's not something internal, something external. When I'm speaking about this, we recently watched like some of the Karate Kid movies with my kids. Everybody's seen those movies?
Wax on, wax off.
So exactly. So when Daniel's son started with the training under Mr. Miyagi, he said he didn't trust Mr. Miyagi, but he trusted him, but he didn't know what he was talking about. He had him doing all of his chores. Everybody know what I'm talking about or no? Yeah. Most people do. So he's training this young man, Daniel, to be a good at karate. So he was making him do all these movements, but through housework. So like wax on, wax off. And Daniel kept doing whatever Mr. Miyagi was telling him, paint the house, paint the deck, and eventually kept doing it over and over and over again, that it became natural to him. When he was finally thrown into the rink, he knew how to fight. He had all the skills. I think it's saying something like that. Make his will like your will. When you start out, keep trying to make your will like God's will. Keep trying to do the mitzvot, try to connect to God, try to align with the ways of Torah, and God will make your will like his. God will help you out. Like things that I think you could read, I'm not sure exactly how to read it, but you could read something like that. God will take care of you at that point, help you on your way. Like if you have certain things that you want to do, God will take care of you and take care of your wills at that point. But you haven't gotten to the point where you fully incorporated that will into like that, those ways of living into your internal being. When does that happen? The second stage. at that point, you're able to nullify your will in face of God's will. At a certain point, it becomes one with you, and you've nullified yourself to God's will. You're not just doing it, not aseh. Aseh. God will help you. God will take care of you. Well, at that point, God will assist you in that point. But still, there's still a you. You're still there. At a certain point, once you keep doing God's will so much, it becomes part of you, like second nature. You've nullified yourself to God's will. At that point, you're like walking around almost like a divine creature in a way. And at that point, because you are so connected to God, things happen for you in a kind of like a special way. You're so aligned with God's will that you're in touch with people. You're able to manifest God's will in reality. You can impact people in a positive way. I mean, people will start to kind of like coalesce around you, and you'll be able to impact reality in a powerful way. So I think it's like the first stage is God's guiding you along. God's taking care of your will. God's helping you. Mr. Miyagi was taking care of Daniel's son and guiding him while he was learning all the moves, right? He was making his will like Mr. Miyagi's will, as if, right? And then at a certain point, it became second nature to Daniel. He was able to battle, fight others, and be involved with those skills, and to be able to succeed and influence reality. So I think it's kind of like, I'm bringing an example from like a weird example from a movie, but trying to explain it with that example. Like at a certain point, the message I'm trying to tease out of this is like, it's not easy to be Jewish, and there's a lot of stuff that's new to us can be seem overwhelming and difficult, and not second nature to us. Not second nature. How do we get to that place where it becomes embedded in us? It really is about practice. It's about aseret. It's about make your will like God's will. It could be a lot of things, like davening. Davening is kind of difficult. I don't know. Some people struggle just with the Hebrew, right? Once you get the Hebrew down, it's like then then it's struggling with intention. There's a lot of things, and so it's really about like lots of training. And if you can train yourself more and more and practice, it can become really embedded in you, and to the point that it becomes part of you. Once it becomes part of you, that's where the good stuff happens, because you're on a level where you can impact people, you can impact people's will, you can influence. You have a lot of strength in doing good things, but it's really about like all the work that goes in beforehand so that you're ready in game time to like succeed. Yeah. The highest level of this really is like, if someone is really able to manifest God's will inside of themselves, like that, what they really want is what God really wants, which is a very high level, right? Very high level. At a certain point, people will listen to you, people will follow you, you can impact people in a very positive way, because like they can feel that what you're saying is like coming from a divine place, like coming from a good place. And so like I think that's kind of what it's saying also. Like the more you're in tune with your neshama, the more you've trained yourself in God's will, that you're kind of really aligned with God's will, the more influence you'll be able to have. People will follow you, people will be guided by you, people will listen to you, because you'll have that divinity, that divine guidance that you're able to offer. So that's a little bit on that Mishnah. I think that's one way to read it. This idea of training yourself. The first part is aseh, do, make his will like your will. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you'll nullify your will in the face of God's will. And at that point, you really be able to influence others in a powerful way. Others will nullify their will. They'll listen to you. They'll be able to follow you. They'll listen to your guidance. The world will open up for you in a better way, because really, if your intentions are to follow divine path, Hashem will assist you a lot of times in that way. So that's why others things will fall into place. Not all the time, but a lot of time. All right, so let's go on to the next Mishnah. Hillel, yay, we're in Hillel world. Hillel said, "Al tifrosh min hatzibur." Do not separate. So which page is this? This page 57. So Hillel says, do not separate yourself from the tzibur. Don't separate yourself from the community. Okay, we have to see what that means exactly. Then he said, do not trust in yourself in the day until the day of your death. Whoa. How do you know the day of your death? You don't. He's basically saying, don't trust yourself. We have to have some self confidence. We have to see what he's talking about. Okay? Do not judge another person until you have reached their place.
Like walking in their shoes.
Yeah. So I I found a really nice commentary to that. I put it in the book. It's very short here. It's like 2 paragraphs. Maybe we'll read it together. Do not say something that cannot be understood, trusting that in the end it will be understood. It's a little bit of the language in English and Hebrew is also a little bit cryptic. We'll have to try to understand that. The last one is, say not when I shall have leisure, I shall study, because perhaps you will not have leisure. That's a great one. That is the anti-procrastination Mishnah. Okay. I don't know, and I don't want to believe anybody here is a procrastinator, but for those out there in the world who are a procrastinator, this Mishnah says, don't say, oh, the language in Hebrew is really cool too, really special. Al tomar l'kshefneh shema lo tipaneh. Like kind of rhymes. But don't say when I'll have free time, I'll study. I'll take care of this tomorrow. I have some errands to do. It's not due till a week from now. I'll take care of it then. Don't do that because it might not free up. You might not have that free time you think you're going to have to do it. Why am I sharing this with you though? Because like a lot of times, and probably in many professional realms, it's like if you, as a doctor or whenever as a salesman, like you have certain things you need to do, and you say, I have that window of time to take care of it. And then once you get to that window of time, all of a sudden that window is completely filled with other things, and then you lose the opportunity to do it. Happens a lot of times. So Rabbi Wellberg's very careful with that. He knows there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes up, funeral, this, that, or the other. So he always has his stuff prepared so that if he doesn't have to get to that point where that window closes and he doesn't get done what he needs to get done. So it's something to aspire to at that level that he's at with that. But let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah has one more teaching, I believe. Oh, that was the last teaching in the Mishnah. All right, so let's go over some of these teachings. They're all really great. Let's do a little bit out of order. Let's talk about do not judge another until you have reached their place. Okay, let's read what I wrote in the book. I'll read it. I'm not going to project it on screen, but I'll read it to you at home if you don't have the book. The Meiri explains the final part. This is page 57 because it's short. I'm reading it. The Meiri explains the final part of the first statement in a creative way. Don't judge others until you see how they act in their place, in their home, and away from the public eye. Okay, so what does he mean? Sometimes people will come through in a public sphere. Their public persona is so different than their private one, for good or for bad or for whatever. It's completely different. Like somebody will pretend in public to be extremely happy, boisterous, and then in their home they go home and they're sad, right? So you could just be like, oh, they're completely fine. Like they just had this horrible breakup or they lost a loved one, but they look perfectly fine. Don't judge them until you know what they're like in their makom, in their home.
I don't think you should judge people. I don't think there should be a standard of when you
Correct.
should.
It's offering a reason
I don't
why.
think you should judge, period.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's offering a reason why. It's agreeing with you, I think. But it's giving you a reason why. You don't know how people really are. I hear what you're saying. You're saying that if you do know how they really are in their home, maybe you can judge them. I don't know. It's interesting. That's an interesting point you're making. Let's finish the thought though. Okay. I hear what you're saying. Well, that's the other teaching. Don't judge them until you're in their place. You're never going to be in their place. You should never judge them. This is a little bit different teaching. It could be the opposite too. Somebody is, I don't know, there's like stories about a stingy person who everybody thought they were a grouch and like they were very stingy. It turns out after they died, people found that they donated all their money to all these causes. They were just very modest about it, right? You don't know how somebody is by what you see in public. It's so especially true today, this teaching. Like there's all these like influencers, like the profession of being an influencer. So they're like, they Instagram take pictures of themselves and their life looks perfect, but you have no clue what's going on in their life. We have no clue. People get caught up in that. We really don't know. And so really, if you really want to understand somebody, I'm not saying judge. If you really want to understand somebody, know what they're like, both in the public and privately. So you can really get to understand them and really get to know who they are. So it's gonna be, don't judge them, don't try to understand them, try to analyze them until you get to their place. So you see the full picture. Okay.
But Rabbi,
yeah.
but Rabbi, I guess I have a problem with that because in today's world, people are saying a lot of crazy things that they may not necessarily have that their personality at home is different from what they're saying out on the streets, and therefore they're, as you say, they're influencing but they're not really meaning what they say. They're just out to just kind of, change some sort
You're
of.
saying like they're better at their home and then in public
They're doing whatever maybe their boss said that they should do, or that they are trying to gain some advantage that they really don't believe in. So they.
correct. So it's basically saying like, we have to be careful not to get swayed by what we see. We have to take a
Right.
deeper look at the
That's
individual.
right.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's saying. Now Nadine's pointing out that like maybe we shouldn't, the Mishnah could be the simple reading is like, don't judge somebody till you get to their place. Like you don't know what somebody's been through. So we talked about this in a previous Mishnah, which is a judge heavy data kol hadam, judge the whole person l'kaschut with merit. And we explained at that point, basically like you don't know where the place they're coming from. Like somebody might have had a really tough day and you come across them and they're very stressed out and you take it personally, but it's not even about you at all. Somebody did something wrong to them earlier, or like they had a tough childhood, right? And there was once this politician, Tommy Lapid. Anybody remember him in Israel? He was like on the left wing, and he was he's kind of like a little bit of an angry person. But he was he's a Holocaust survivor, and he went through so much that people understood that, and like they understood he had like an edge to him. You don't know what people have been through. We knew that about him. You know what people go. So the idea is like, don't judge somebody because you don't know what they've been through. You don't. And so that's kind of like another message connected to that. All right, so let's go back to what time is it? So okay. So do not separate yourself from the community. I found a nice like excerpt from this book, Ethics of Sinai by Rabbi Bunim. I mean, this is gonna mean nothing to you. I'm just showing you a blue book, but whatever. So I just thought this is nice because I think like a lot of times in our society, people have like a me and a them mentality when it comes to community. Like, what can I get from this community? What and like, or they, like speaking in terms of me and them, basically he's saying like we have to see that I'm part of them. It's not just me and them. Like, what can I do to make the community better? How can I improve it? I'm not saying we're all coming here to this community or any other community to get our needs met. However, it's really important not to just stay stuck in the me, to extend ourselves and see things as a them also. So that's what he says here. Hillel thought that the individual should keep in mind in step with the community, participate in its efforts, rejoice in its happiness, mourn its tragedies. It is wrong to regard yourself as a me on one side of the fence and the community as a them ranged on the other side. You're part of them. The problems of the community are as much as yours as they are your neighbors. I just think that's like a good way to think. Just to know that like if you see something wrong at the shul or whatever, I don't know, like something's not okay or like something's messy or whatever, like it's okay to like help make it better as well. Like I don't know, it's like wherever you are to be part of what's going on. That's the idea of not separating yourself from the community, seeing yourself as part of that. So there's more that he wrote about that. Rabbi Wine wrote about procrastination. And there was one more teaching here that we didn't really talk about, but it was good stuff on this one, okay? Do not say, so this it says like this, do not say something that cannot be understood, trust in and will be understood. What's going on? I don't know what it's talking about exactly. Also, we like to do this, we like to connect all the teachings. So here's a way to connect all these teachings. All these teachings are about being aloof. Okay, that's my way of connecting them all. Think about it. Separating yourself from the community, that's being aloof from the community. Do not trust in yourself until they're death. People who go through the world and they're consistently have exaggerated confidence, they're not really connected to reality. They're trusting in themselves. They think they could do anything. They're unlimited. That's like on the board. If you can lead to borderline narcissism in the place that like if you're consistently 100% trusting in yourself and everything, that can be dangerous. You're disconnected from reality. You have to be sometimes be humble and know that like I may falter. I have to be careful. So another one is do not judge another until you reach their place. That's also a little bit aloof. Like don't judge somebody until you're in their place. When you're not in their place, that means you're disconnected. So it's about staying connected. Also, do not say something that cannot be understood. So we have to explain this. This is also an aloof thing. The last one is don't say, one day I'll get there. When I get there, I'll study. That's also disconnection, right? Disconnected. Say, I'm gonna do it now, action, right? Don't say I'm gonna push it off. So all these, I think that's the general theme here. The next Mishnah is by Hillel, and I think he balances it out in the next Mishnah. That Mishnah says, ends with this, I'll show you. Ends like this. It opens this Mishnah, do not separate yourself from the community. The next Mishnah, in a place where there are no people, strive to be a person. I think these Mishnahs kind of start you from being disconnected to being connected. That's, I think, the connection between the two Mishnahs, okay? So I took it to the next level there. But we're gonna get there, okay? We'll see that. But let's go back for a second. Let's understand this statement. Don't say something that cannot be understood, trust in it, and it will be understood. Let's understand this. So don't say something that's difficult to be understood, meaning don't say something that that's like not nice or that's inappropriate, trusting that thinking that nobody will end up hearing it. You can read it like this. Don't say something that cannot be understood, meaning like it's not good language. It's something bad. Because in the end, it will be understood. Meaning secrets get out, basically. Don't trust that like your thing's not going to be heard. First of all, we shouldn't overall be speaking bad things. Like even if you're not afraid it's going to get out, it's not good for our personalities, but like for our spiritual selves. But don't think that like what you're sharing that cannot be understood. That's like what's the language here? Something that's like difficult to hear. Don't say something that's difficult to hear thinking no one's going to hear it. Be careful with what you're saying because things get out and people do hear things. So be careful. That's one way to read it. There are two more ways to read it. Another way to read this, which is the way I like to read it, is if you read the Hebrew, don't say something that can't be heard in that moment. Sometimes you want to say something, but your friend, your spouse, whatever, your children, they can't hear it at that moment. A lot of times it's like that. You have something to say, you know it's true, and they will eventually see that it's true, okay? There's times when you think it's true and you're not right, okay? But there's times when you're right and the other person's wrong, and you know that it's right, and you know that they're going to come around and they're going to see it. Don't say it if they can't hear it. Why? Because in the end, at least they're going to hear it. Meaning when they're ready, they'll hear it. Maybe from you, from somebody else. Basically, it's saying, try to keep the right pace with your sharing of truths with others. If they can't hear it in the moment, be careful to not share at that moment. Because at a certain point they will be ready to hear it. It's just sofoli shama, and eventually they will hear it. They might hear it from you. They'll hear it when they need to hear it. It's complicated because sometimes someone really does need to hear it, and you have to say something. But there's many times where it's like they're just not ready, right? So be patient, okay? Sofoli shama, it'll be heard eventually. They'll be able to hear it eventually. When that's the case, then share it with them. It's a difficult thing. It's very difficult to do that, right? Especially if you're a person of truth. You see a truth and you know it's true. You want the other person to hear it, but not everybody's ready to hear things at the same pace that you're ready to share them. So I think that's the Mishnah saying. One more teaching connected to this is sometimes there's like a lesson or a message that you might need to say that eventually people will be able to. It's the exact opposite, really. Like there's a philosopher, this philosopher named Franz Fischer. You ever heard of him? I never heard of him. He wrote some I guess like a Christian theologian or whatever. When I was in Bar-Ilan University, one of my professors taught us his teachings. He was kind of obscure until my professor kind of discovered him and presented him to us. That theologian wrote his teachings many years ago because even though nobody listened to it, he knew that it had to be said. He knew it was a truth that the world needed to hear. So he wrote it down. Thankfully, my professor, many, many years later, uncovered it and taught it. There's a lot of teachings like that like somebody says in one generation and it can't be heard, but in the end, so Fali Shema, and eventually people will be able to hear it. Like you publish something and then nobody's accepting it for a while. And then at a certain point, someone picks it up and that becomes the dominant theory or something like that. Yeah. That's a good example. Another example is the rabbi actually wrote my dissertation on, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lerner. He was obscure Hasidic Rebbe. He lived early 1800s, early 19th century. nobody really learned his work for many years. He wrote it, he's taught it, and his students wrote it down. Shlomo Karlebach started to teach his teachings, like, the last few decades, and it became extremely popular, to the point that when I wrote my dissertation on him, one of the top professors in the field of Jewish philosophy, Jewish Kabbalah, saw another dissertation on this. So anyway, but I had felt like I had a unique contribution or whatever. But meaning at a certain point, I became so popular. But at a certain point, but he said what he had to say. His student was Rabbi Tzadok of Lublin. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a second. He was a second, but he wrote all of his teachings down, and they've lasted till now, and they're very popular. So don't be discouraged if sometimes. It's the exact opposite of what we talked before, but don't be discouraged sometimes if your message can't be heard right now. Sometimes it'll be able to be heard later. Like if you have it's all as a parent too. Like you have a teaching, you want your child to know. Okay, they may not hear you. You might repeat it many times. My mother has a teaching where she says, and I actually try to live by this: if you do good, you get good. I don't know if that's her message or whatever. She said it a lot, and we used to like laugh at it. If you do good, you get good, whatever. But now it's like something that's stuck in my head, and I know if you do good, you get good most of the time. But you try. If you do, you have to do good things, and good things happen. And so that's a lesson that like you might not be able to be heard at one point, but if you're consistent with your messaging, at a later point, it might click with your children, with your grandchildren, and they'll be able to like adopt that message. So basically, don't give up if something can't be heard. If you read like this, do not al tamar davar she'ishal lishma. Don't say something like, don't hold your back from saying something that can't be heard, just because it can't be heard. Because in the end, hopefully it will be able to be heard. So it's like a little bit different of the direction than that. So that's a few of our teachings. Let me just kind of summarize. We talked about the first teaching we talked about here was the rashut, the permitted world, right? And how to deal with the gray zone. We spoke about making your will like God's will, and we talked about like the power of training yourself to kind of follow in the ways of God, and through time it'll become more second nature, and hopefully really become part of you. And when that happens, you'll be able to have a stronger impact in reality. It'll make sense what you say, because people will feel it's coming from a good place, from a divine place. And finally, we spoke about all these words of guidance by Hillel. They're all talking about not staying aloof, staying connected, being locked in, and all of them kind of don't disconnect from the community. Don't believe in yourself until the day of your death. That's a good one. We didn't really dig into that, but that's a good one too. Like this idea of like, don't be overly confident. Have some humility. You have to always be on top of things to make sure you don't fall off, all these are about staying connected. Don't judge your friend until you get to their place. We explain that in two ways. It could be you don't know what they've gone through, or it could be don't judge them. Don't try to understand. Don't think you understand them fully until you've seen their public and private persona. They could be going through a lot of tough things. You could think that they're perfectly happy, or the opposite. They could seem very grouchy in public because they're just nervous. Some people they'll get to a Shabbos table and they're extremely quiet. They're extremely nervous. They're extremely not friendly. But when they're with their close friends, they're a completely different person. Or in their home, they're completely free, right? So don't judge somebody. Don't try to assess who they are based on how they act in public. People might just be an introverted person. It's nothing bad about that. They just may be introverted, and they're not the same in public as they are. So get to know them. Get to know them in public and in private, so you can really know them better. We had don't say something that can't be heard, that's eventually be heard. Many explanations to that. We also talked about don't procrastinate, basically. Don't say like because in the end, you might not have that free time. Don't bank on the fact that you're going to have the free time to do something later. Do it now. When it comes to studying, it gets complicated though sometimes when you have multiple things you want to do now. It gets complicated. I want to do this, I want to do that. Can't do them all at the same time. So life is complicated, but try to, a lot to think about. All right, Sharkov, thanks for joining.